I'm just going to set this up to record. Thank you for that introduction, Heather. And I didn't record it because we don't need all that wonderful stuff about my dancing being broadcast at a later date. We'll just keep that one in-house with this Zoom to the 125 participants that are already on here. I'm going to go through a few things tonight that hopefully help a whole lot of scholarship students or prospective scholarship students in here. Now, I know I've got a lot of teachers in here as well, but I'm going to pitch this at our student level, and I hope that that's okay, but please know that I'm not pitching this at you teachers. You might know some of this stuff already. I'm going to trust Heather to monitor the chat. So I would love for anyone that has questions along the way to pipe up, put them in the chat, or even unmic as you come in and just shout it out there, because same goes to the students. So students who are in the room, please feel free at any time. I'm not a scary human, and I would much rather you piped up and asked me what the hell I mean by something. So you can get that answer straight away, because I'll be more than happy to support you with that, okay? Cool, so I'm going to share my screen and kick this party off. All right, Kapai, can everyone see that? Heather, I'm trusting you. Is that coming through okay?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Thanks, Susie.
Awesome. So my name's Susie, and a little bit of background about myself. So I work at the University of Canterbury, and I also, in my spare time, am the president for Physical Education New Zealand. So I've been working in this sector for quite some time. I used to teach, I trained as a PE teacher. So I used to teach lots of things, including scholarship back in the day. And I still have really close connection with how scholarship works. I keep up to date with that stuff. Probably not as much as Heather Lindsay does, but the things that I know quite a bit about and can possibly support you with are around research. So in my time at university, I teach people how to be PE teachers, but the other thing I do is I do lots and lots of research. So I'm coming from Christchurch. I live in Ōtautahi here, and I have two boys. This is what they look like. Most of the time we're having fun and doing some sort of physical crazy activities together. What's the go tonight? So tonight I really want to go through a few things, and this was made quite clear from some of the teachers that were involved, and it was around the helpfulness of making a plan, finding and using research for scholarship, source validity and examining multiple perspectives, and developing or refining a topic. Now, I have some assumptions coming in tonight, and these are the assumptions that I'm carrying with me. Firstly, that you as students understand critical theory. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go back to your teachers and ask your teachers more about critical theory and about critical thinking. So I'm assuming that we all have a bit of an underlying understanding on how these terms look and what they mean. I'm also assuming that if you're in this chat tonight, you've thought about scholarship and you've maybe chatted to your teachers about scholarship. So if that's not the case, then again, after this session, go and have the chats with your teachers about both of these things. Okay. I'm going to put this in a nutshell really, really easy. Should we plan for scholarship? Yup, absolutely, without a doubt. There is no ifs, buts, maybes about it. Can I submit a whole lot of assignments smashed together? No, it's not going to fly. It's not going to cut the mustard. And hopefully by the end of this presentation today, you'll understand why that scholarship is really, really different from the work that you do in some of your NCEA assessments. So making a plan, I'm going to start here, and there's some really cool, helpful tips. And this is kind of going to be the way that I roll throughout this presentation. There's lots and lots of tips. This presentation, by the way, is in the chat, so you can actually download that PDF straight away if you go up to the top of the chat, or if that's not working for you, then we'll send this out. So you don't need to write these notes down. If you have not been to this website, which is nzqa.government.nz, I'm clicking on it now because I want to actually go in to show you. This website here is absolutely bomber for all your needs scholarship. And as a student, this is most helpful. Over on the left-hand side, it's got scholarship subjects, and you've got all of them here. And the one that we're doing is health and physical education down here. Now
Sorry, buddy, I'll just let you know that the screen share has stuck with the PDF.
Ooh.
So instead of wanting to being able to show that other window, we're still sticking with that. So if you want to give us that.
Let's go. Yeah, no, I'm going to go into here and see if I can do it this way. Is that coming up now?
We can see it now.
Yay, fabulous. Okay, so in this website here, the reason I've gone in here is because it's really important that you do become familiar with this site. Down the left-hand side, there's all these subjects, and you've got health and physical education down here. Now, it draws your attention to lots of different information. Information's about the standards, about the documents that you need to draw from, and also it's got exam materials and the performance standard itself. So this is a real great source of information for anyone starting scholarship. The one thing I want to draw your attention to in here is this part here, assessment reports. And the reason why I say that is because every year the markers and the moderators compile together information on what people did well in scholarship and what people missed in scholarship. And they pop this all into an assessment report. It's a really helpful wee piece of information. So for those of you that haven't been to that website, I really recommend that you do that. I'm going to just go back in and share my other screen. Cool, awesome. And keep those questions going because Heather is also going to, oh, hang on, that one there is not working. And Heather's can answer any of those questions as she goes through as well. Just try and share back in here. Is that working? No, that's still being annoying. Let's try. Okay, is that back to my PowerPoint?
Yes, yep.
Perfect. Excellent, thank you. Sorry for that. A couple of other things about starting with your plan. So your teachers will really understand and be able to support you if you should go for SCOL or if you shouldn't go for SCOL. Fundamentally, it's really important that you listen to that feedback. It is your decision at the end of the day, but your teachers will probably have a good understanding of if you're at the level or if you're overwhelmed or if you might be able to give it a crack. They're going to have really good advice around that. So I would listen to them about making that plan. One of the other important points is the challenge of scholarship. So if you are doing this because you want the scholarship itself, then be prepared for disappointment. And I say that in the nicest possible way. A lot of you might be successful. Many of you might not be successful. It can be a little bit of work, and that work should be targeted because you want to do that work. You want the challenge of scholarship. You don't actually want that end goal. So if you're doing that, just for the end result, then you might be disappointed.
Susie, I've just got a comment here from Michelle. It says, she says we can't see the current slide. So I guess the presenter view we've got there is the first slide. So I don't know if...
Let's have a look. Stop share. I'll try again. Having a nightmare today.
No, you're fine. It's good to hear that it's...
No,
you know.
Let's have a look. Is that working?
Now we're scrolling through.
Okay, cool. I just won't come out of it again and it should be fine. Thanks so much for the feedback, team. Now, the reason I say don't smush assignments together is that The whole point of scholarship is that this is like a mini research project. It's not like an essay. When you do your NCEA type stuff, most of that tends to be a persuasive essay or a written piece of work. And scholarship's slightly different. So your plan has to actually draw together some research and big picture ideas, and also your personal input as well. And I'll get to that in a minute. But what I'm saying is that this is framed slightly differently. Other tips around that planning, making sure that you understand some of those key terms and concepts, and understanding the New Zealand curriculum and critical theory, okay? I want to draw your attention to level 8 of the New Zealand curriculum, because there are so many terms in here that kind of gives away the level that we're working at. So when we think about what we're doing with research, this critical part is really, really important. And in your plan, you are going to draw from multiple things. So you're going to draw from your personal experience, you're going to draw from research findings. So you might do a wee survey with your peers, or you might interview someone, you might gather data from your school, you might have some insights that you can pull together from classes. You're going to pull from sources of literature or evidence, and you're also going to factor in the time that you have left to do this. So it has to be reasonable, it has to be actually achievable. But what you're trying to do here, the most important thing, is the thinking. Okay, so you're pulling from all of this stuff, but you're not regurgitating that knowledge. You're actually going, what does this mean? And that's what forms your submission. So it's slightly different from maybe what you do in other assignments. Now, I think one of the hardest things about scholarship is around that topic. So this is what the guidance says. And again, this is all on the website. So this is nothing new probably to some of you that have been there. And if you haven't, the links are all in this document for you later. What I say about a topic is I say these things. If all your friends are doing it and it's a common topic, don't. And the reason I say that is because if you imagine, so you might have one dude who's marking scholarship, and they've got a stack of about 50 scholarships. And if they're all on drugs and sport, yours needs to be outstanding. It needs to be absolutely outstanding. So it's really difficult if you don't have a point of difference, if you don't have an original idea, if you've cut and pasted or gone with something that's real sort of meh in the middle, then you may not have that wow factor, or you might have to do an exceptional job of something because it's going to be compared to others, okay? And it's just the nature of the beast. One of the big questions is that I ask students sitting scholarship is, does it piss you off? And excuse me with that, but I feel like if the topic pisses you off, then often you've got a couple of things. Often you've got personal experience, something's happened to you, or there's some sort of injustice or inequity. And I tell you what, it's a lot easier to write about something if you actually feel it, if you live it, if it challenges you to think. So when I'm doing my research or when I'm doing my writing, most of the time I'm doing it on stuff that I love or stuff that pisses me off, because I find that it's much easier to actually write about. The fourth point here is, if you choose a topic and you are finding it hard to fit biophysical knowledge with sociocultural components, you need to stop and rethink. And I think this is probably a really important point, and it needs to drive the choice of your topic. If there's a force fit there and you're cramming things in, then often what happens is that you get to the end and it's a real mishmash, and it's obvious to markers that you haven't understood the New Zealand curriculum or what it's trying to achieve. And can you actually find stuff on it? So do a quick search. Is there stuff on it? Heather, are there any questions or anything coming through that's kind of in this realm?
No, at the moment, from what I can see, everyone is just keenly listening to the presentation. And please remember, though, if you would like to write in the chat some questions, we can get those through to Susie if you don't want to come onto the mic. So keep going, Suze. It looks like it's hitting the mark, mate.
Epic. Okay. When we talk about finding and using research, this is something I'd really like to draw your attention to, because this is quite a cool thing. So I've got this book, all right? It's in my house. It's really old. This is not as old as I am. Oh, no, wait. I'm not as old as this book. That's what I meant to say. It's the evening. But what I want to do is I want to prove a point, and I'm going to prove a point with this book. So you know how recently everyone's like, intermittent fasting is really cool, and we've all got to fast, and fasting is life, and that's cool. I'm not judging that, but what I'm saying is that's not actually new. Okay, that information has actually been around for a really, really long time. So this book on the no breakfast plan, look at that wee puppy there, and the fasting cure, this here was written by that dude Dewey, and it was in, wait, hang on, the 1900s. Look at that. That is old. It's actually dusty and it's breaking. But also, intermittent fasting has been around for years, and religious practices have maintained fasting for ages. The ancient Greeks did it. It was with the Olympics. So the point of this is that your view or a new view might actually not be right, or it could have been around for a really, really long time. It could look and feel really different from the other side of the world. So when we think about stuff critically, we need to be questioning, what is this idea? Is it a new idea? Where has it come from? What are other sources saying about this? And I don't know whether or not you've heard the terms, but at the bottom of this slide, I've got two terms there, primary and secondary sources. Now, a primary source is the original source, okay? So say this is the primary source, the original source, but someone out here wrote a blog about it. And so say, it could be me, Susie Stevens. So Susie Stevens wrote a blog about the no breakfast plan, okay? Now, my writing of this book, or taking knowledge from that book, now is a secondary source. Okay, so in that blog, you might learn some stuff about it, but the original reference is actually from the primary source. Now, in research, we like to get back to the primary sources. And the reason we like to get back to the primary sources is because then the information hasn't changed too much over time, or it hasn't been misinterpreted. So someone in a tweet, for an example, could take a wee passage of this and it could be taken completely out of context. So often tracing back to the primary source or the original source can be really, really helpful. If we think about this from a PE context lens, all of these cool PE contexts that we commonly see and use today actually were about something else. So dance. So if any of you do dance in your schools, if you have a dance unit, that actually originated from the ideas of celebration and spirituality, okay, or even courtship as well. So contact sport was connected with contest. Team sports were actually all about people becoming more civilized, okay? So these contexts actually have a deep historical meaning, and they all come from other forms of knowledge. So this is kind of painting a picture of how we trace knowledge back and the importance of knowing where an idea comes from. Now, this looks a bit overwhelming, but I think you'll probably revisit this because it is kind of like a step-by-step guide. Now, when I'm doing research, I use lots of different frameworks and different perspectives, but essentially, it really is just this. This is kind of what I do. I discover and explore my topic. So let's, for an example, take pizza, because we all had takeaways. I'm hoping we all had takeaways today. If you didn't, I'm sorry. Much love, aroha to you. But level 3 down where I'm from is we could have access. I'm sorry to the Aucklanders above. I'm really sorry. But anyway, let's take pizza. Got sidetracked. Let's take pizza. So if pizza is my topic, what do I know? Well, I know I like pizza. I know some common toppings of pizza. I know that pizza is commonly hot. The assumptions is that pizza is normally cooked in an oven. Bases can be different. So there's lots of stuff. You get the picture. Now, when I move into this next phase, I start to negotiate these assumptions. So what does this mean? Does it mean that everybody has pizza the same way? Does it mean that this food came from somewhere else? Do my assumptions that pizza's hot actually make sense? Or is there somewhere in the world with cold pizza? Number 3 is their power involved. Is the reason I like pizza because of marketing, the way that pizza has been marketed to me. Is pizza marketed differently in New Zealand than it is in Italy, for an example? Like if I want pineapple on my pizza, and those from Italy, are they going to be okay with that? Or are they going to say that's not actually pizza? You're not using the right pizza ingredients, okay? And then I can come across to the questions around what do I need to know? Is there anything I need to know about pizza that I don't already know about? I don't know if there's any cultures in the world that don't eat pizza, have never seen pizza before. So is that a missing piece of information? So you can see how this research unfolds all the way through around to informing what I have learned. So what I'm doing with my research is I'm learning information, I'm identifying my assumptions in the process, I'm questioning whether or not there's any reasons for me to have these assumptions, and then I'm going, what's changed? And then I'm trying to talk about that. So this is how that research cycle works. Some tips about finding information. There are so many sources out there, and I'm a nerd, I'm an academic, so I have access to journal articles all the time, but I don't just use journal articles. So I want to talk through some of these things. In this slide, there are a lot of examples about different places where you can find sources, okay, sources of information. I think the most important bits on here, I tend to avoid Facebook, Insta and TikTok because it's really hard to find out if that stuff is legit. Like I think most of the time you can't tell if it's actually real knowledge or it's actually factual, or whether someone has just plucked this out of thin air. The other thing I'd like to draw attention to is the places where you can't get knowledge in written forms. Now, in our Western world, or in New Zealand, we tend to privilege the written form of knowledge, but there are many oral traditions and passing down of stories that might actually inform your work in scholarship, and that is completely okay. There's a lot of Indigenous knowledge that has not been written, and it might be part of whānau or iwi. You might want to include that in your submissions, and that is fine to reference that as personal communications. It strengthens the work, and it's also very important. So there is a bit of knowledge privileging and hierarchies when it comes to the written form of knowledge. And what I'm saying is that all different forms are really important if we can trace back to where those forms came from. I've included this in the PowerPoint, and like I said, you can click on all these links later. But what I've done is I've drawn your attention to some really cool places with evidence-based stuff. It's based on policies and guidelines. So I've got some New Zealand examples there, and just to draw your attention to, so the World Health Organization fact sheets in that global section, if you wanted to know about diabetes, for an example, they have fact sheets that are written up and referenced by professionals, and often some of the world's best contribute to the World Health Organization information, and you can go straight into their publications space and you can get all of that for free. So they have fact sheets on pretty much anything you can think of in those health areas, okay? Another thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the Sport New Zealand data and insights, which can be really helpful around physical activity patterns, and the Treasury. And if you were all kind of, if we're in a classroom, I'd ask you if anyone knew what the Treasury is on about. But the Treasury in New Zealand is essentially looking at money and economies, okay? And the reason why I've included that is if you want to know how much money is being spent in a specific area, and that's part of your topic, then the Treasury can be a really good place to have a look at how New Zealand is investing money in support, okay? So that's what this slide is going on about. Now, I want to talk about Google Scholar, because Google Scholar is a fabulous, fabulous place to look. So if you go to Google Scholar and you use an advanced search in Google Scholar, you can really define those terms, and it can help you to access the information that you need when it comes to scholarship. What happens with Google Scholar is the way that it picks up information is that an academic, so say I write a paper, and I submit that to a journal, what I can do is I can actually send that to my university first, and my university put that in it's called a repository, and it basically is housed at university, and it's a free print copy before it gets published in the journal. So when you go on Google Scholar, and if an academic or an author has done that, you will get that free paper, and that can happen all through Google Scholar, and it's completely legitimate, and it is a really good way of getting free information. I would never pay for a journal article. So if you are searching for a journal article and Google Scholar takes you to a link, or you get taken to a web page that says pay $40 for this paper, don't do that. I wouldn't do that at all. And the reason I wouldn't do that is that journals, they actually take a lot of money from people, and it's pretty it's unnecessary. I think there's a couple of things. If teachers have University of Canterbury students, you can actually have access to a login, and you can give that login to your students when they are doing scholarship. So if you aren't aware of that, click on that link for teachers. Those that don't have Canterbury, University of Canterbury students, I don't know whether or not your local universities will do the same, but they might do. So you could draw their attention to that. Most libraries will actually help you. So if you are looking for a specific topic, take that into your librarian and ask. And that same goes for University of Canterbury libraries. So there is an ask for help button on the University of Canterbury library, and you can actually ask one of our librarians, and they will help you no matter what age you are, no matter if you're in university or not. They will still help you to try and find those sources. Your teachers have great friends. They can hook you up with a paper. If there's a specific topic that you are not finding things on, get in touch. And then Decent Humans will also send you a copy of their article for free. So if you're Googling away and you find someone who you think is a bit of a genius in this area, then you can often find their email and get in touch, because trust me, academics love to talk about themselves, and they love nothing more than sharing their knowledge. So it's a really, really good tip. There's some practical search tips here for you as well, because sometimes searching can be quite tricky. If you're trying to find an exact phrase, put it in inverted commas. So Susie Stevens is awesome. If I put that in inverted commas, nothing's coming up, okay, because no one's written that ever about me. But if someone is trying to search like drugs are bad and put that in inverted commas, you'll get hit after hit after hit after hit, because heaps of people are talking about that exact sentence, okay? Another cool tip is this PowerPoint one. So if you didn't know this, you can search your topic. So say pizza, and then you've got you've got that colon, and then you've got point PowerPoint, like PPT. What that does is it brings up every PowerPoint from around the world that's online that actually is about pizza, which is really cool. So you might get stuff from Harvard or Stanford or whatever. So you might get them from universities, you might get them from other schools around the world. Now, how do you know if they're decent? Well, again, it comes back to the sources. Have they referenced their sources? And if you can check one or two of those sources to see whether or not they're in the, and I mean like sources as in references, not like sources on the pizza, but what I'm talking about there is if they do have those references, then you can actually know that what they're talking about is pretty good, okay? Search terms matter, and you can put or in as well to expand that. So they're just some little tips. How are we doing, Heather?
So far, so good, Suze. We're looking really good, mate. We've probably got you, by the looks of where your slides are at, and having shared the presentation with me, I think we probably have another 10 or so minutes.
Awesome.
And then some time for Q&A.
That's fab. If everyone's doing okay, we another 10 minutes should be great. So I want to draw people's attention to how do I know if it's fake news, okay? And this is really, really important about where it comes from. There's a whole lot of science and a whole lot of research around human behavior, okay? And this is important when we go online, when we start searching for information, because as a human race, thinking's not actually a strength, okay? So I'm going to flick through these slides because these slides are pretty boring, and you can read them in your own time. But what it's saying is it's saying that we foster norms, so things that we think are normal. We are influenced heavily by what lots of other people do, and it drives our behaviours. The media tends to pick up on this. So what I'm getting to here is how do we think outside of that? So we've been customized, we've been shaped, we've been modeled into thinking that this is the way something is. So how do we get out of that? And what we do is we use some sorts of frameworks, models, and theories to help us think. And this can be very helpful when we are choosing sources of literature or we are delving deeper into a topic. I would like to draw your attention to this frog. Now, what we're going to do is, I don't know, Heather, if people are going to want to mic on, but if you're feeling brave, anyone out there, if you're feeling brave to mic on or to put your camera on, if you're not in your pajamas, much love to all the brave people out there. But what I want you to do is I want you to look at this picture, and I am going to tell you that I think this frog is poisonous, okay? So I think this frog is poisonous. So have a look at the picture, have a look at the link. I'm telling you that I think this frog is poisonous, all right? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to think about whether or not what I've said is true and what you could do to challenge me on that. And if anyone's brave enough, you can still keep your camera off if you want, but you can mic up and challenge me. What information are you receiving for or against what I'm saying here?
Feel free to, folks, to type it in the chat, particularly if there's a bit of noise going on where you are, and I can read that through for Suze as well.
Get amongst it. I'm hoping someone comes at me. Is everyone too nervous?
So a couple of suggestions. No, as it says, most popular pet is a frog. So, you know, pets are not usually poisonous. My pet frog is a trained assassin, however. So there is potential for it not to be poisonous, but it should be avoided by the sounds anyway. So yeah, people are coming through with feedback, especially looking at that URL. Where did you get this information from? You've been questioned.
Oh, great question.
What can you back up your statement with?
Oh, great question. How good is this? I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. What else we got in there? So someone's drawn attention to the pet frogs, 17 most popular pet frogs. So that's a piece of information, right? So that's telling us something about, if this came from a website that's saying that these are pet frogs, then we have an assumption that pet frogs should be safe frogs. Okay, now that doesn't mean that this frog may not be poisonous. It could be a poisonous pet, but the assumption is that because it's a pet, it's not poisonous. All right, what else have we got in the chat, Heather? Anything else going on there?
Yeah, reiterating that, saying that as it says on the link, 17 most popular pet frogs. So maybe the assumption there from Kira is that we are not drawn to have our children or whānau around things that are likely to cause them harm. And Alan has added in that the media teaches us to associate colourful animals with poison. So potentially there's something there that she's thinking you may have picked up on, and that makes this believable.
Hard. Like, look at those eyes, like red eyes. Oh, I don't know, they're a bit dodgy. They're a bit dodgy to me. And I always got told as a young child to stay away from the really brightly coloured animals because there was some sort of toxin going on. And I was always told that all frogs are poisonous, but some just more than others. I don't know. Did anyone write in there, because she's a doctor, she should know?
No, I don't think anyone has fallen into that trap, Susie. So
because this is a really common trap. So one thing about academics is we know a shit ton of stuff, but about a tiny topic. All right, but people think that you're really intelligent, but we're actually not. We're only intelligent about one little thing. So frogs is not my forte. The point of this, okay, so I'll stop talking because that's just ludicrous. But the point of this is that the whole, when we use a framework, or when we start to ask questions about something, we can break down our assumptions, or we can break down where something has come from. And when we use the frog as an example, that was so cool, hearing some of those questions in the chat, because a lot of them align with some of these questions down the side here. And I use Camper all the time when I'm doing research, and you probably use a framework like this, or a framework like Speech might be familiar to you. But I use Camper when I'm thinking critically about things, especially around the evidence and the examples. So what evidence is being given to support the claim, and what examples are given to back up this claim? And that relevance and reliability. So using a framework is, we talk about criticality all through scholarship, but criticality can be used when we are engaging with sources of literature as well, or how we're coming to these opinions, or how we're forming our ideas and understandings. So don't just think of criticality or that critical theory, don't just think of that as something that we do to talk backwards and forwards over a topic. Think about it in terms of, how am I using this information, and where did this information come from? And that will really help you to formulate a solid evidence base and position. So I think my last point that I will end on, and then I will hand it over to Heather and we can open for some discussion, is my tips are, when you are collecting sources of information, I think that for me, the most important things as a researcher is, one, I automatically record the page number for where I get things from, because if I have to return to that text, or if I have to return to that website, there's nothing worse than having to scroll through and find that information. I also include an APA reference, because in your assignment you will need to reference, and I normally write that out. I actually have a system that does it for me now, but in the past, or if I'm doing a short thing, I will just do that manually, and I write the reference out and I keep that next to the work that I've done. I copy and paste any URL straight in there, so I know how to get back to it. And if I directly cut and paste something from a website or from an article, I actually put that in a blue colour. And the reason I do that is so I know it's a direct quote, and I put the page number at the bottom. And that means I'm not going to risk plagiarising or using that piece of information as is and going, oh, I wrote that. That's awesome. How good is that? Because sometimes further down the track, when you go to pulling all of your information and your research together, you'll actually forget where you got things from, and you might forget even what you wrote or what somebody else wrote. So having a color coding system can be most helpful. And the fancy name for a working document like that is called an annotated bibliography, if anyone wanted to know that too. That's just a top nerd tip for you. But they are some wee top tips as well that I do when I am studying or pulling together information. So that is me to a T. I hope everybody got something out of that presentation. Even if you have a look at it later and go through some of those links, I really hope that it was helpful. And any questions, please jump in there, even if there's practical questions. No questions are silly questions. And I am here 100% to support anything that comes through that chat.
Hey, so that might be our opportunity if we if you stop the screen share, then we can bring people back to feel like they're in this chat together.
Absolutely.
And we've even got some brave people who've got their videos on. So
yes,
we know they're real people in here. I think that's what we decided the other day was the difference between a Zoom meeting and a Zoom call with faces. So I'm just going to pause because I know that when people are talking in a Zoom, others are reluctant to speak. So I'm just going to pause and know that Susie is really keen to help out with any direct questions, and here's your opportunity, folks.
I've got a question. Hi, Susie.
Hi, Kate. How are you doing?
Survive. I'm jealous of your pizza. Stuck in Auckland. No pizza.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
A lot of kids are asking me questions around how to set out their report and how to write it and putting subheadings and sort of how the layout can go. So do you have any advice around that?
I mean, there's no specifications on that sort of layout other than the font size and the overall size, but that is for a reason, because it should be a personal way to pull it together. I would say whatever you do at the start needs to be really punchy. It needs to be punchy. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be attractive. It needs to be a conflict or a bit of a wow factor. That first part is really important. And then it's building. It's no different to a case where you're building evidence over time and then you're concluding the so what does this mean? You have to draw it to a conclusion. You have to go, what does it mean here? This could mean this. There's got to be critique and debate throughout. And then bam, so what? This is what. Okay, so that's, but how that looks in terms of subheadings, as I would just go for something that is readable, that's accessible, that a marker is going to enjoy. So if a marker is finding it hard work, then that's not in your favour.
Suze, I'm just going to jump in. There's a couple of questions in the chat. Can you give us some examples of topic choice and how to use one of the 4 documents without channeling the topic choice to the name of the document? For example, child and youth wellbeing or balance is better, being relevant to those policy docs. Have you got any suggestions, please, about topic choice? Because there are still people getting familiar with the need to link to a specific document, potentially more than one, but to hone in and focus on one of those.
Okay. I would always start with the NZC. So start with your curriculum, and if you haven't, if anybody in here has not read the curriculum, then make sure that your teacher points you in the right direction, but have that on one side. And when you read about the learning area, health and physical education, that will start being able to draw connections between these documents. If you go just to a document in isolation, you might get taken down a path which takes you away from the area of learning and the intent of the NZC. So I would look at a document, one of the four, in line with the NZC to formulate a bit of a topic. In terms of examples, so the wellbeing framework that exists is amazing, is absolutely amazing. So you could have a topic around physical activity lifestyles, or what is risk, maybe could be, is social media impacting negatively or positively on behaviours, on physical activity behaviours, okay? So that's an example of a topic. Now, how does that link? That could link directly into the child wellbeing strategy, because there could be some things in there about health and well-being, about what a child needs, about, yeah, kind of about anything. I don't want to give too much away there. I don't want to take away from somebody's topic, especially if someone is doing that. I'm so sorry I used it as an example. But what we need to get familiar with is not being worried about sharing our ideas. Start talking about those topics with one another, and start talking about those topics with your teachers to try and formulate what one could be. But there's got to be something in your life too. So, you know, I think about me. I think about when I was a student, I got really pissed off with sports drinks like Powerade back in the day, and I got really frustrated that that was being marketed to sports teams at that secondary level. And so this topic's been done for quite some time, because I remember I'm a little bit older than most of you, but that was something that upset me when I was in physical education and sport environments. Now, if I connected that to some of those plans that exist, that are up there, I could easily draw an argument around the good of sport, or how sport's been promoted to do something, but how things are piggybacking off that, or, you know, marketers or sports drinks are being marketed in such a way that they are being connected to this almighty good, ethical, wonderful sporting space, and what the risks are, or what the concerns are there. So I guess you have scope to think about these things really creatively, and I guess scholarship wants to try and allow that to happen. Scholarship wants the creative thinking. It wants you to go on different tangents and be pulled in directions that matter to you. Have you got anything, Heather, to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think your description of that is bang on, Susie, and I think it's part of understanding the difference, isn't it, between writing assignments at level 8 of the curriculum for responses to achievement standards and being involved in actions towards the report writing for scholarship. I'm just going to scroll again. I've managed, folks, I apologise, the whole direct message versus sending things out to everyone had eluded me up until this point, so I apologise if I've replied to you and it wasn't meant to be heading your way. I'm not too sure, says this person, Susie, if this is correct, but would you be able to interview people or watch interviews and include this information in your report? And just while I've got you, Susie, so there's 2 questions.
Okay, so what's the first? Can we do one at a time? What's the first one?
I really want to see you multitask. Fair enough. I'm not too sure if this is correct, but would you be able to interview people or watch interviews and include this information in your report? Because you did talk before about non-written forms.
Absolutely. So you can, so say for an example, you want a perspective of your class, then you can survey your class and you can include that data. So you could say, I asked around my classmates, and, you know, 30 out of 32 people in this class feel this way about something, or because all of that is data and it's based on your experiences. It's the same as your own personal experience. So you can include personal statements, you can include things that have happened to you, but you are disclosing that that's a personal statement. So you might say, you know, this is what I have experienced, this is what my classmates have experienced, this is what the research says. So you're actually using what we call triangulation of data. You're using multiple forms of data to influence why it is you have come to the conclusion that you have come to. So definitely you can use research. Yeah.
Couple of interesting questions in here, Susie. This next one, do you have any advice for how to manage your time in writing such a large report?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's really tricky, and it's really tricky on top of your schoolwork. What I tend to do is, personally, I tend to put aside some writing time every week, and I actually have it scheduled into my my daily work, and where I know I'm good at writing, or I'm good at that. So that tends to be in the early morning. I can't write very well at night. I get too tired. So you might think about a time in your week where you can pencil in some time and have a routine time where you sit down and you're actually pulling together your thoughts and ideas. I think planning is really important around that timeline, but you have to be realistic. If this becomes too much and takes you away from life, then you have to ask yourself, is it worth doing? And if you weigh all of that up and you think that this is actually not worth it, then that's fine. The other thing is that you could be progressively doing this. I don't know if anyone in here is year 12, but you can progressively do this over 2 years. So you could start thinking about this assignment, and then you could actually submit it the following year. That is completely okay to do. And if you've actually thought about this, or your teaching programs include critical thinking and things right back in year 9 and year 10 levels, that will really help you build upon that knowledge. So the planning is kind of, yes, there's this last minute planning, but there's actually the work that you do up until that planning is equally important as well.
Susie, secondary sources. The question here is, if they cannot find the primary source, can we still use the secondary source, or is it not reliable enough?
Yeah,
I think in my experience too, what we're thinking here is that the secondary source still needs your critique. You need to be able to feel confident that it's close enough to the intent of what was in the primary source. So sometimes X number of steps removed means that the secondary source might feel a little bit wishy-washy. So we need to be aware of what it is that we're using and calling a secondary source. But you feel, Susie, that's fine. You just reference it and note, I guess, to be considerate of where that source is from.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, Heather. So yes, you can absolutely use secondary sources, but I just want you to be really careful of where that came from. The secondary source might have actually progressed the knowledge or challenged the knowledge. That's excellent. That's fabulous. And if they've got the reference to the original source, then that's a really strong secondary source to use. But if it's someone on TikTok who's gone like, this is a book, the book is awesome. And that's kind of what they've nailed as information, then you might want to question its whereabouts. But that's a great question. It's a really solid question. I just read something in the chat as well about paying for scholarship support. I don't think it's necessary at all. I would not recommend that you pay for scholarship support. I think that critical thinking is really important, and I think teachers have expertise in critical pedagogy and critical thinking, and I don't think critical thinking is something that needs to be marketed or sold. So I don't think it's required. I think that if you struggle with writing and writing is something that you need help and support with, then maybe talk to some teachers who have expertise in that space. So you might have some English teachers that are very good at helping structure a report. You might have some maths teachers that are very good at interpreting data sources. You might have some health and physical education professionals in your space that you can go to and ask advice on topics. I think that the resources are around us and they are free. We have to find those resources. I don't think it's a very wise investment to be paying for those sources or for that support. That's just a personal opinion though, and I know that others might take a different point of view, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I haven't had much talk around this at all in Christchurch. I'm not sure if that's just because the schools that we hui with have not necessarily got the same kind of senior leadership focus on results coming out of scholarship, so it's not as competitive potentially. But there is interesting how wherever you go, there seems to be potential for ethics to come into decision making, and I think I would like to suggest that as teachers that we just use our professional integrity and consider the process as a big part of what being involved in scholarship is, so that we want to make sure that students do justice to that. Outsourcing might also water that down a little bit. Susie, if we're looking to focus on a topic, for instance, something related to mental health, this one's interesting because I think I personally believe you have to be really careful with this. Would we be able to focus our report on our own school and its efforts regarding the topic and possibly then relate that to the community, or would it be best to not focus on your own school?
Oh, that's a really solid question. I'm unsure if I'm the one with the expertise in this space, and I would recommend maybe NZHEA providing some comment around that, because they're probably more experienced than me to give an answer to that. So perhaps, Heather, we follow that one up, and we could send that out to participants or send that out to teachers post this, or even put it on PEN's Facebook and say update on this, because I wouldn't want to answer that incorrectly. I think they're probably delicate situations, and I think your teachers probably have some experience and some knowledge to offer in that, and the contexts would differ very vastly. But if it's a difficult topic, if it's a really challenging topic around mental health, then that does require some consideration and thought. So it was a good idea. It was a good question to ask.
Yes, and I think having spoken to Rachel Dixon recently about this type of well, as part of other discussions around topic selection, that we need to be really careful about the implications if we risk anonymity or we don't have the way to protect any participants, or just making sure that confidentiality is also upheld. So there could be some aspects to that involved in how we might answer that question, but we'll definitely get some follow-up on our PEN's website there.
One other question that I think I just want to doubly make sure has been answered, and it was around the linking to the 4 docs. And I think someone assumes that you have to link to all 4. That is not the case. So there might be some crossover. You might use a couple of documents. You do not need to link to all 4 documents. So you're trying to link to one of those documents. So just making that really, really clear. Otherwise, that will become overwhelming and really unspecified, really, really big. It will probably expand to something that's quite uncontrollable. So, so you want to really focus in on one aspect of one of those docs, okay?
Another one here, Susie. So I'm just responding to one there. Health literacy. Do you think it could be a good topic area to link to and again, the 4 documents comes up here again. Susie's just explained that we're talking about a focus link to one of those, but the person is, Alice is wondering if health literacy would be a topic, and if so, would you be able to give a guideline on how it could be started and some example questions? Gosh, Alice, I think that might be a question that is so specific that we might encourage you to go back and talk with your teacher, because it is one of those things that possibly needs unpacking with more specificity than helps others tonight. Yeah, and maybe even requesting some support from NZHEA through their Facebook page, that might help as well. There's a couple of things in here. It feels like scholarship is far more sociocultural than biophysical. Do you have any ideas on how you could ensure that this does not get lost? This is Mr. Squire from Cashmere High School in Christchurch.
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think people assume that it goes way sociocultural, but it doesn't. It doesn't need to be the case. I mean, these scholarship submissions, these reports can be anything you want it to be. And when they say a combination of biophysical and sociocultural, it's not talking about, I did a point on this, I now need to do a point on this. I did a point on this, now I need to do a point on this. It's talking about the topic encompassing both. So, you know, it's really conceptualizing that curriculum area. So the biophysical should not be second place. It shouldn't be like the body doesn't matter. It's all about how we are in society, or vice versa. It needs to cross both domains. And it can be set up in any way, shape, or form.
Awesome. Any resources that you recommend, Susie, to encourage learners to use and develop and improve their critical thinking skills?
Oh, yeah, definitely frameworks. I mean, for me, you can Google, like if you just Google critical thinking frameworks, like I know that seems really naff, but there are thousands and thousands and thousands of ways to think about things differently. And often it's practice. It's just practice, practice, practice. I think that critical thinking has to start with power assumptions. If you aren't having conversations around power when you're talking about criticality, then I would pause wherever you got up to, and I would go back to power. Who's holding the power? Who has the power in this photo? Who has the power in this media story? Who has the power behind the scenes here? As soon as you start talking about power, you start to unearth the complexities around a topic, and you start to unravel some of the other things. So, for an example, you know, if we think about speech is all around power. So that social power, that political power, educational power, the economies, power of economies, cultural power, so cultural hierarchies, how cultures work, history, so the power of history. If something has been entrenched, my father's 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 father did it. It's an old boys or an old girls network. So there is power in all of these things. So sometimes when we think about critical thinking, we often forget that whole line of thinking, or that whole framework, came from Marxism, came from power. Okay, and so really focus in on that. But there's lots of tools that you can use, and they are freely available on the internet, and they just get people thinking and starting to go through the practices of this.
Still questions coming through, Susie, and I'm conscious that we will look to have a finished time, but we'll see how we go here. Submitting something you've altered from the previous year, not advisable, is that correct, due to lack of originality?
No, it's fine. Yep, absolutely fine. So you can write something one year, you can submit it, and then you could submit the same thing the next year if you want. There might be different markers. The other thing I would say is that if it didn't do well and failed miserably, then you would want to learn from that. Okay, so they would probably want to see some growth, some areas that had changed, but but I mean, it's your work. It is, at the end of the day, it is your work. You can submit it when you're ready to do that, and you can submit that twice. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there consensus? This is from Karen Holder in Hawke's Bay. Is there any a consensus on how much support there is from teachers in the writing of the report, including editing? Example, schools using Google Docs for feeding forward. Another interesting question around professional integrity, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. Teachers should not be helping you with the writing and the pulling together. However, there might be resources available to you, or teachers available to you, that can help you with portions of it. So if someone was rewriting, so this is what I'd say would be a no. If a student sent me some work and said, hey, Miss Stevens, can you please do a full edit of my work? And I went through and made comments and suggestions and said, this here needs to change, this needs some more, this is spelled incorrect. If I did a full edit of that work, I would say that's probably too much as a teacher, okay? If I get sent something and they say, look, I've got a few questions about this, then as a teacher, I could say, have you thought about this? What have you done about this? I could ask some questions to help the students or help you work out what it is you needed to do to improve on that work. Keep in mind that at the end of this, students have to sign a form to say that this is their own work. You are actually making a declaration that this is your work, your professionalism, your integrity. It is yours. So if somebody else has done a lot of that work for you, or has changed it so much that it's changed from what you originally sent to someone for edit, or before you got that feedback, then it's not technically just your work anymore. Somebody else has contributed to that, okay? So I think teachers need to pull back. I think teachers need to provide a lot of help and support around thinking, around where to access things. Maybe in that topic selection is where teachers can really help, because it might be that there's a topic that you can see a student might get tripped up on later, and you might go, actually, I need to support you with this topic selection, because this here might end in tears a little bit later down the track, and you don't want someone heading off on the wrong path. I think teachers can support through with helping of, providing frameworks on how to use data, how to interpret data. English teachers can be helping around writing or skills, critical writing skills. All of that is really fine, but I think if you as a teacher are manipulating work, I think you've gone too far. Awesome. I hope that makes sense. I feel like some of this is, kapai.
The broadness of topic, Susie, the question is there sort of a way to understand whether or not you're too broad or too specific? So the question here is, how broad or specific would you recommend your topic?
I recommend that you go and you see every assignment that is up there, every exemplar that is up there, and you have a look at the way a topic is written and the specific way a topic is written. And that would be my recommendation. Okay, is have a look at all of those exemplars and have a look at that assessor feedback, because that will give some really clear guidelines around how broad or how narrow that topic needs to be.
Susie, I think we've got there. I'm pretty sure we've satiated, well, you have satiated everybody's.
Hang on, wait. Alice has just come in and said, where can I find the exemplars? Alice, in the PowerPoint, there is a link and it takes you to the scholarship website with everything you need. So that will be in this PowerPoint presentation. Much love to Alice. Yes, she's loving it. She's all over it.
Hey folks, what we might do is wrap up our meeting. Just so Alicia says no more exemplars on the website. They did delay posting last year's, didn't they? Sorry, one more question, I think. So you got one more in you?
Yes, I've got one more in me.
Trinity will be grateful, I'm sure. If the topic is not a sensitive topic, we're focusing on your own school, on my own school, limit my report. Is it supposed to focus more broadly?
No, on your own school is fine. Absolutely A-okay.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah. Richard's just put in NZ HEA site. They have some exemplars.
Great. Well, we were needing to get that sorted then for pens. But why aren't they on the NZQA site, I wonder?
The 2021 ones.
Yeah, 2020s, yeah, from last year.
The 2020, I thought they were up there. That's okay. I might be mistaken. That's okay. Maybe we'll follow that up, Heather, and just make sure people can access those exemplars.
For sure. Well, folks, thank you so much for your attendance, your interest and your support of your students in their journey towards their HPE scholarship report. I very much enjoyed being a part of this kōrero, and the biggest thanks, I guess, goes to Susie for giving up her time, for preparing an excellent presentation, which is thorough and also has elements that just keep it real for us and help us to understand how we can be of support to our students. And hopefully tonight there's been a number of those students on the call who have enjoyed hearing that it is a doable and achievable activity, but also that the process is a big part of the learning curve for them. Lots of thanks to you here and aroha coming your way, Susie, in the chat. And so I will wrap up by just concluding and saying I wish everybody all the best to stay safe, whether you're teaching from home or face-to-face. Keep doing one of the most influential and amazing jobs that there is out there, and best wishes to all of you. Ka pai and good evening, everybody.
Mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you so much, everybody. Pō Māria, have a lovely evening.